like you said, I was constantly thinking about food from sunrise to sunset every single day. And I also had that feeling of being addicted to food and how freeing it is when you realize that, no, you don't have an addiction. You just need to eat a bit more. Today, we are talking to Cleo. So Cleo Oldham is a certified health coach and a life coach, intuitive eating specialist, and BSc exercise scientist. She is committed to helping women break free from restrictive eating, food obsession, and emotional eating so that they can have body confidence, happiness, and the freedom that they've always wanted. She works with clients privately and in a group setting to guide, coach, and hold them accountable along their journey to food freedom. So welcome, Cleo. I'm so happy that you agreed to do this interview with me. How are you today?
I'm really well, thank you. And thank you for that lovely intro. It's always funny listening to someone else describe yourself back to you, but it's great to be here. I'm so happy.
I'm happy about that. So to kick off this discussion, can you just tell us a bit about who you are and your background?
Yeah, for sure. So you've given a bit of my titles away in that bio, but really I have always been someone who has loved food from being a very small child. So my parents used to say, I used to ask like, when's lunch? What are we having for lunch? What are we having for lunch tomorrow? Like it was always an ongoing question. So that's where my love of food, but then I kind of went through, the teenage years of feeling self-conscious in my body and not really knowing myself at all and just trying to go in with the crowd, right? That was me. I was very much, I just wanted to have friends and wanted to feel safe, really.
Mm.
And then I went on to study. So I loved sport as well. I was very sporty. So I went on to study sport and exercise science at university. And in that degree, I covered nutrition, physiology, psychology, all of that stuff. I absolutely loved it. Kind of always knew I wanted to go into health. Ended up going on a bit of a tangent and doing project management for a tech company for a few years. um, but doing lots of health and wellness stuff on the side, like running an
Mm.
Instagram and really staying in touch with that world and during that time. And then I decided, actually, I was in that job and it involved lots of travel, like European travel. So I went to lots of new countries and cities, and I absolutely loved that. So obviously, when the pandemic hit, that was like a big shock to the system because it was stopping all of the travel part of it. So that's when I decided to qualify as a coach, start learning more about intuitive eating, and I'd realized I'd already been intuitive eating myself for about 6 years,
Mhm.
but really putting proper principles in place, proper practices that I could teach and coach other women with, and it kind of just flowed into just women. I don't really know how that happened. It was kind of just, I think I've always wanted to do something in female empowerment and female confidence. It's just been part of who I've been.
Mm.
So that's really like my story. And then I kind of had a time where I was doing both jobs at once, and then I decided to kind of let the old job go and really step into my coach shoes, which is where I am now.
Yeah, oh my goodness. And it's so lovely to see you share on Instagram about like your client testimonials and just how you're actually helping women. I find that just very encouraging and very lovely to see, because I think we were chatting like roundabout when you were actually just about to go full time. So it's been really, really amazing to see like the development of your coaching. So there were two things that you said that were actually quite interesting to me. First, I was just curious about where did you actually do your coaching certification? And then secondly, the other thing that I found quite interesting is that you said that you realized that you have been an intuitive eater for about 6 years already. So I was wondering, how was your relationship with food before that? And kind of what helped you to make that transition?
hmm So the first question was about, what, remind me what it was. I was going off on the second question without even thinking about the first. Remind me just real quick.
So where did you do your coaching training?
Yes, that was it. That was the easiest question as well. So, the Health Coach Institute. So that's where I did it. It's HCI, and it's like a worldwide certification. But it's so amazing because a lot of their practices are geared towards intuitive eating. There
Mm.
is some weight loss stuff in there entwined in it, but really it's about how to build your skill as a coach. And it's just such a fantastic institute. I absolutely loved the course that I did there.
Mm.
So I recommend it to anyone who wants to do it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I did mine with IIN, which is another quite well-known institution, and I also really, really enjoyed like everything that we learned, especially the main thing, obviously, that I gained was the actual coaching skill, because before that I'd been wanting to help women, but I just didn't really know how to. I didn't feel equipped. So after that, I definitely felt quite equipped, and I'm sure you feel the same way.
For sure, definitely. And there was a lot of coaching practice as part of the certification that you have to sign off. And I think nothing is more valuable than physically practicing the coaching itself.
Exactly. Exactly, because that's the work.
Exactly.
Yeah. So on to the second question. Can you tell us a bit about the evolution of your relationship with food, and what was that like? What was the trigger point for you to then start eating more intuitively?
So, to be honest with you, like unlike a lot of people who coach in this area, I've not been through some of the. Firstly, I have body privilege, and that I've always lived my life in a smaller body. So I always like to acknowledge that. I've not experienced fat phobia, and I've not experienced discrimination because of my body size. So that made my life different to the people who I mainly coach, but I coach women of
Mhm.
all sizes. So throughout my life, I was insecure about my body size, and that was my experience through my teenage years. And I think it was about age 15 or 16 when I started to notice calories on packets of food, because we used to go at my school, we used to go down to Tesco's or the supermarket to get our lunch. So it wasn't just school meals and like the packed lunch your mum gave you. It was you go to the supermarket and like I would go through all of the sandwiches and pick like the smallest calorie sandwich, the lowest calorie crisps if I wanted crisps or I didn't have those either. And then that would be it. And I'd feel really like I'd be so hungry when I got home from
Mm.
school and feel so guilty about wanting to eat, and I'd end up eating. And I just felt like I was thinking about food all the time, like at that time. And then when I went to university, I very like I was saying, my through my teenage years, I was very much I wanted to just be I just wanted to conform. I just wanted to
Mm.
fit in, and I was very worried of being judged for being a hungry person or eating more than other people. And so I would just kind of put away hunger, and people still said, "Wow, how do you eat so much when you're in this small body? How do you do this? How do you do this?" And I like just didn't really know in my head. I was like, "Well, probably because I'm not eating a lot when you don't see me." And also exercising a lot. So when I went to university, it was very much an exercise, not addiction. I wouldn't say it that far. I'd say obsession.
Mhm.
Like every day in the gym, I used to play football like for 3 days a week, and like train for 2 hours and only still have three small meals in the day when actually I needed a lot more than that. And
Mm.
that sort of triggered a whole thing about me not being able to sleep as well, because I was almost burning too many calories for my body and it needed more fuel, which I
Yeah.
only know now in hindsight.
Mhm.
So it was kind of after uni when I finished there and I thought, maybe I'll start to just fuel my body a bit more so I can. It was mainly focused at the beginning on being stronger at the gym.
Mm.
And I think that my relationship with food increased as I became more comfortable in myself, because I started to let go of, some difficult things that happened with at university with ex-boyfriends and all that sort of stuff that made it really difficult for me emotionally. Let go of that, came and stepped into my own confidence and place, and I was very much like, okay, I need to eat more through the day. And I'd say that I've been on this 6-year journey, but it was probably 2 years ago that I fully, when I started doing my coaching, when I started doing this teaching other people, I've learned so much more, because
Yeah.
through that stage, like the first 4 years was very much like a just need to fuel more, exercise more. I feel a bit better when I eat more. It was very unstructured, but I
Mhm.
didn't have the thoughts about food as much anymore.
Mhm.
And then the past 2 years, it's been very much like okay, I let go of exercise obsession, which was a huge one for me. Like
Yeah.
I felt guilty if I did nothing in the day. I felt guilty. Like I'd go out with my friends, have like drinks and things like that, wake up at like 7 a.m. the next day and go to the gym and be on the treadmill, like running, or on the cross trainer running and running to burn the calories that I thought that I'd drank the night before.
Yeah.
That was still happening up until 2 years ago. And then I decided to stop doing that when I learned more about what was going on in my mind and why I was doing that, my motivations. So that's been my
Yeah.
journey up until this point.
Sure. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And there's a lot of things that you've said that actually stood out to me. And so going back a little bit earlier, you mentioned how, you acknowledge that you haven't necessarily gone through some of the struggles that somebody who, might not look the same as you, might have a bigger body, what I've experienced, you haven't gone through that fat phobia and discrimination. And something that I've observed and also, doing this work and like trying to educate people about diet culture and all of that stuff is like some of this terminology, people don't actually understand what it is. People might not even know what diet culture means, which to us might seem super obvious because like we're constantly reading about this stuff, right? But you mentioned the term fat phobia and like discrimination. And I'm not sure that it's obvious to a lot of people or to some people who might be watching this interview that there is actually discrimination against people based on their size. So can you just describe a little bit, whatever comes to mind, you don't have to go in super depth, about, what is fat phobia and how does it sometimes play out?
So there's so many, I mean, I think it plays out in every aspect of our lives in this society, in the Western culture that we live in. And it starts from, being a child and immediately assuming, you're making an assumption if someone's in a larger body that there is something wrong with them. And you immediately, it's like a societal belief that's fed through the media, that fed through culture, that tells us a bigger body is wrong. So they are obviously doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And you have that from being a very young child. If a child is in a larger body, it's immediately, oh, what's that parent feeding them? Why aren't they doing enough? You should really get that child to, stop eating as much, or you should put that child on a diet. Like, I've spoken to a lot of women who have been on diet since they were 9 years old. Like, it's crazy. But I would say it comes in through, one of the main things is through health issues, is like the association between being in a larger body and it being the reason as to why someone is
Yeah.
struggling with their health,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's from the lowest range of things like a cold to, cancer or heart disease, right?
Yeah.
And actually, there's so much research now coming out that the two things aren't like causation. It's not
Mm-hmm.
you're big in a
Yeah.
big body, and that's the reason why you have these things. There's
Exactly.
so many other things playing a role in there, and
Yeah.
one of those being that the medical world is very much discriminatory against people in larger bodies. So people feel ashamed to go to the doctor, and people, basically what I mean by discriminatory is they don't see that person as a person. They see their larger body and they make assumptions about them, and
Stereotyping.
they stereotype them into a box when actually there might be something more serious going on, and it's missed because they immediately assume it's to do with their larger body. And I think it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting because I recently had a client literally last week who has discovered that she's got very high blood pressure. Um, and she's not eating she's not binging, she's not overeating, she's eating a nice, balanced, nutritious diet, right? And of loads of different foods and moving her body consistently. And, the doctors immediately said to her, well, you need to lose weight.
Yeah.
Just go
Yeah.
away with this little leaflet and lose weight, and then that'll
Can you
solve the
imagine?
problem.
My goodness.
Yeah. And actually, I've seen research that weight cycling, where
Mm-hmm.
you go on a diet, lose weight, gain weight, lose weight, gain weight, is a higher
Risk
risk of high blood
factor.
pressure
Mm.
than weight loss, than
Yeah.
a bigger body. Sorry. So it's
Mm.
like mind blowing, really.
I think what's interesting is that, like if you understand science and scientific research, you understand that there are two concepts, causation and correlation. And people who like to make claims about weight and it being a risk factor for, I mean, it being basically not a risk factor, but the reason for ill health, they like to back it up with science, but then it's like there isn't that distinction between what may be a correlation and a causation. And I think that is very much entrenched in this culture, of just assuming that somebody is unhealthy just because they're larger. And I think an interesting way to think about this is for somebody who might be listening and this is the first time they're hearing about something like this, because it is quite a paradigm shift. Something that might be interesting is to reverse it, right? Like does it make logical sense to assume that somebody's healthy just because they're thin? Like I'm sure everybody knows of at least one person who is quite thin and they don't work at it. They never exercise, they maybe smoke, they eat not so healthily. And so if you think about it in that way, you can see that you can't necessarily judge someone's health just only by looking at the size of their body. So I think that's really amazing. And I think that's going to raise a lot of awareness for people to think differently about not just their selves, but other people as well. Um, mm. And
I
then
think one of the things, sorry, I want to just add, is like I think one of the best qualities to share with other people is just having a flexibility and an open mind to shifting your mindset, like with that paradigm shift, being open to noticing what your assumptions are about someone and not blaming yourself for it, just being like, oh, right, I actually didn't realize I had fat phobic discrimination going on in my mind, but now I'm aware of it. Now I can really start to make changes, because it's the same with homophobia, racism, whatever it is. You may realize after someone speaks to you about it that you have some of those beliefs, but it's not like the end of the world. You're not a bad person. It's just about saying, how can I actually open my mind, change the way I'm thinking about this, and just see it from a different perspective.
Exactly. That's a really good point, because there are always, like, we live in a society that has so many isms, right? So you're bound as a human being to internalize some of those things. And as a responsible person, it doesn't mean that you are, never going to have incorrect thoughts about people, but that you take responsibility for how you think and like unlearning unhealthy belief systems. So yeah, thank you for reflecting that. And then there was also something else that you said, which I just was like, we need to talk about this. So you spoke about how you realized at some point, actually two things. The first thing was, you said that you realized that, because you were kind of like burning so much more energy than you were taking in, you were having trouble sleeping. So I think that another thing is, like, in the experiences that I've had with women who I've coached before, is that they don't actually always realize the bad outcomes that restrictive eating and overexercise can have on their health. And because, diet culture really worships a certain kind of slender body, sometimes even if they know and they experience adverse side effects health-wise, they might justify it because it's worth it, right? Because you're ultimately going to get the body that you want. So can you share with us, what are some of the adverse health outcomes that a woman can experience from, let's say, restrictive eating or overexercising, or maybe even both?
That's a really good question. And yeah, I did touch on it a bit earlier from my personal experience, but through coaching hundreds of women, I recognize so many things. And I think firstly, everything is interconnected in our body, right? And our brain needs fuel to function. So if we are under fueling our body, right, firstly, the brain is going to be in starvation mode or in stress mode or high alert, because if you think about the way our brain was formed and how we're formed as humans, less food is a threat to our lives. So our brain is shutting down, saving energy. Our thoughts go to consistently thinking about food non-stop. One of the biggest commonality between every woman I work with, she says to me, I just want to stop thinking about food every single day, all day. The moment I wake up, the moment I go to bed, I feel like I'm addicted to food. Actually, what's going on is they're just underfueled. And it sounds so simple and kind of scary when you've been dieting for a long time to think I've got to eat more, but that is the reason it's going on. So it has effects mentally in every single capacity, whether that's insomnia because the brain's in that overloaded heightened stressed state, so it's kind of reeling through thoughts, or whether that's anxiety that's being increased because your brain doesn't have the fuel and it's in that high alert state again, whether that's depression because the brain can't cope with just the balance, the hormonal balance and all of the balances of everything going on in the head, right, in your mind. So I think mentally there's so much that it shows itself in so many ways, right? I think that's the number one thing that I notice in every single woman that I work with. But it's also about, when we are eating less food, the body is in this starvation mode, which means that our energy levels are depleted hugely. Because if you think about it, that's a survival mechanism.
Mm.
So eating less food, the body has to really hold on to that energy and use it for organ function, not for movement, not for all the things you do on your day to day, right? Just going up and down the stairs, going to the shop, all those things that take movement. You're going to have less energy to do those things because the body's just conserving the energy it has. So your energy will also be depleted. When your energy is low, you're also less present because it's like the brain is tired, so it's harder to stay in the moment with the people that you love most, and your brain's always drifting off and all of those things. So I'd say energy and mentally, however it impacts you mentally, like I said, it's different for everybody, but often insomnia and anxiety are two that are common.
Yeah. Also, what comes to mind for me is because I'm also quite interested in like female hormonal health. So like this is quite on the extreme side, but like if you are also really restricting your calories and you're working out so much, you can miss your period, which is really, really bad from a female health perspective. Other things that I think of are like mood impediments, you know, like just being irritable all the time because you just don't have the energy that you need, and like not being able to concentrate. Like I remember when I was in kind of that phase of my life, I already had an irregular period at that time for different reasons, but like you said, I was constantly thinking about food from sunrise to sunset every single day. And I also had that feeling of being addicted to food, and how freeing it is when you realize that no, you don't have an addiction, you just need to eat a bit more. And energy as well. Like you're just so tired. Like I was in varsity at the time and had to walk all over the place, right? Because campus is massive. And you just find yourself coming home after school every day so freaking exhausted because you just don't have enough energy. And another thing as well, which I've also experienced, is just like slow digestion. Like, because like you said, your body has to focus its energy on those essential things, and digestion and also procreation are not absolutely essential to survival. So those are other things that I thought of that come into play with this. And then the last thing that you said in your response to my previous question, which I thought was so interesting, is you spoke about exercise obsession. And I think that that's also another one of those things that are so can go under the rug, you know, can be swept under the rug because of the culture that we live in and the moralization of like health behaviors, you know, just the effect of, I guess, some sort of a halo effect for somebody who like eats well and somebody who exercises. But that kind of makes it easier for people who have, you know, severe restrictive eating and exercise obsession or even exercise addiction to kind of like get away with it because they are seen by other people who may not have as much insight into the inner workings of that person's life. They're seen as like, you know, morally superior because they have the willpower that other people don't have when actually they have a problem. So what could you share with somebody who maybe doesn't know how to identify something like that? What could you say would help them to kind of evaluate themselves and their relationship with exercise and if it's healthy or not?
I think the biggest indicator of that is, do you feel guilty for not doing it? If you're sitting there with guilt, with worry, or thinking, shouldn't I, all day, that's a clear sign to me that there is exercise obsession or an obsession with calories. And I think just on this point is all the women I work with, they either have they have an all or nothing mindset when it comes to food and exercise or movement. And it's either people have an extreme obsession with exercise or they have none at all because they think it has to be something specific. But I think what's relevant to both of those groups of people is they both have a view that exercise has to be hard, sweaty, you have to burn a number of calories, spend a number of days and hours in the week doing it. Whereas actually I would question both groups and say, what if it could be easy? What if it could be enjoyable? What if it could be joyful, right? And just seeing like how far off their reactions are to that question. Because you might ask someone who is addicted to exercise or obsessed with it, they'll go, wait, no. It has to be structured. I've got to do this number of weights, this number of reps, this number, whatever it is. But the same answer would probably come from the people who don't do anything,
Exactly.
because they're almost afraid, or there's been beliefs, or there's so much that goes on with that side of things. But yeah.
Yeah, wow. I really like your response because I don't know where it was that I was reading or listening to something along the lines of, oh, actually, it was when I was listening to the fourth edition of Intuitive Eating, speaking about that diet culture and how it influences the way that people think about exercise, that you either have to like do the hardest thing or like you have to do a full hour or 30 minutes or whatever, but like the small things that you can do during the day, they don't count, and there was I think it was a reel that you posted on Instagram like 2 weeks ago or so, and I shared a comment with you about how I really liked it, and you were just showing people how they can sneak in movement throughout the day. Maybe you're like super busy, you have back-to-back meetings all day, and you maybe have like 15 minutes in between, and you can spend like just a couple of minutes doing something, so I thought that was also really awesome. So maybe you can even just share like one or two tips for somebody who feels like I don't have enough time to exercise, or like, you know what I mean? What could you share with them to help them include a little bit more movement in a way that feels accessible for them?
So I'd first like to talk about what we do when we think about doing something new, or something that we may have had past experiences. Maybe it was in physical education in school where you hated it. So that's where your belief comes from. Maybe you joined a fitness class and someone had made a comment about your body, right? Whatever it is that has brought this belief that exercise has to be hard or it's difficult. And actually, what I want to do, I help my clients do this, is connect to the pleasure of movement first, just in your mind, thinking about, actually, when I have done movement before, how does it feel afterwards? How does it feel to have my energy lifted, to be feeling lighter and freer in my body? Because that's what, when you move your body, you're moving around the energy, and you feel so differently afterwards. Remember, I take them back to a time where they've done movement at some different perspective on something that's going on with their life afterwards, just because they've moved their body for 10-15 minutes, right?
Sure.
So connecting to, so motivation in our minds is connected to how comfortable we're going to feel. So if we think, oh, sweat, pain, oh, it's going to be horrible, I'm so unfit, no way are we going to get up between meetings and do something, first of all. So we have to connect to a pleasurable and comfortable place of, actually, how is it going to feel afterwards? So just switching your mindset to that sort of, how can it be afterwards? That's the first thing. And then secondly, also, like you just mentioned some of it there, which I suggested in my Instagram post, is literally setting yourself a challenge of like 2 sets of 5 minutes in the day. That's it. When the kettle's boiling, when you're waiting for something to cook, or you're with your kids and you have like put some music on and dance with them. Like, there's so many moments that you can use. But I think firstly, recognizing, changing your mindset around what exercise has to be, trying to see it in that middle ground, not the all, not the nothing, that middle ground of any movement is good. And I think this might not be completely accurate in the numbers, but I did read that in just 30 minutes of movement a day, where you like slightly raise your heart rate, so it's like walking, that counts. Anything that's like walking up the stairs, right? If you do 30 minutes, it doesn't have to be in a 30-minute chunk. It can be in 10 minutes, it can be in 5 minutes. Just 30 minutes as a whole will reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease by 50%. 50%.
Yeah,
It's
I think those are
crazy.
such important things for people to hear as well, because it's like I was saying a little bit earlier, that we have this idea that it needs to be elaborate, it needs to be extremely tough, you need to like be dripping in sweat, and that's when you're going to reap the benefits. But you're just putting it into perspective of how even just a little bit counts, and that's really important, because there's so much health benefits that people are missing out on because of the diety kind of mindset around movement. And apart from the obligation to move your body to take care of your health, but like, we do need to steward the bodies that we have well, and it doesn't need to be a difficult thing, it doesn't need to be a scary thing. And on that note, the whole thing of scariness and what you were saying about the mindset being the first and most important thing, I completely agree with you. And I'll just share a personal story. Back in like 2016, 17, I was doing a really tough exercise program, and I absolutely will not do anything like that anymore, just because I'm so over it. but I was doing a really tough like HIIT style resistance training workout program. And literally every day, like even the night before, when I knew that I was going to be working out tomorrow, I would get butterflies in my stomach just out of nervousness because of how hard it was and how much I knew that I was going to have to put into it, and probably even not even really enjoy it that much. So I think that's a really, really amazing tip that you shared, and I'm really grateful that you shared that. And on that note, so basically what we're talking about right now is joyful movement, which we know is one of the principles of intuitive eating. So let's, change back gears a little bit to speaking about the food piece. You are an intuitive eating specialist. And from my personal experience and also what you see circulating on social media, there are quite a few misconceptions about intuitive eating. So have you come across any such misconceptions in your clients? And if so, what are some of them?
Yeah, so I think the main one is everyone that works with me, well, not everyone, but I'd say 90%, have had an introduction to intuitive eating already. So they've read the books, plural, but they could maybe listen to a podcast, maybe they follow multiple people on social media. And they've said to me, I've tried it for a long time and I'm still having obsessive thoughts. I'm still feeling guilty. I still don't like my body. And there's still things holding them back. And I think the main thing there is that it can be, it might make people feel like, oh God, oh gosh, this sounds like so hard for me to do. Like it sounds like a lot of work. But I think we think it's a surface level thing. We think, well, I'll just listen to my hunger. I'll eat when I'm hungry, I'll stop when I'm full, right? Because when we're reading a book like the Intuitive Eating 4th edition and all of those big books out there, we usually take 2 or 3 things away from every book. Mm-hmm. Whatever you're doing, no way are you taking in every single thing in that book. No way. It just can't be that way. We know the principles off by heart, but when you're just reading it, like, oh, wow, this sounds amazing, you'll take away, these are the main things which I hear people take away. You just tune into your hunger and fullness, eat when you're full, eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full. And yeah, just listen to the body. Like those are the 2 things, right? Everyone knows that's what it's really about, and you don't have to diet, so they know that they can let go of those old beliefs, like they can let go of them. However, there's so much more to intuitive eating, right? There's so much more. And I think firstly, even recognizing what hunger and fullness is such a personal thing. Yeah. It has to have exploration time. It has to have a set conscious effort to do that at the start. Mm-hmm. You have to spend conscious effort doing that. But you also have to be going through a process of how do you actually let go of those diet behaviors and those diet thoughts? Because yes, the book describes, okay, here's how to recognize them, here's how to let go of them. Right, you might do that for a few days, but 2 or 3 weeks later, those voices in your head are back, about calories, about all of that stuff. So it's much more about going through a process of being really conscious about your body and connecting to it, but also going into your beliefs and how you actually shift your beliefs about your body, about who you are in the world without dieting. And I'd say thirdly, and what's often missed, is a whole piece about emotional management, because really what's going on with a lot of emotional eating, binge eating, overeating, obsessions about food is not being able to manage your emotions in a health supporting way. So there's a lot of suppression of emotions, there's ignoring emotions, there's numbing of emotions. And when we've got all of that going on still, yes, you can understand that you need to tune into your hunger and fullness, but when you've had a bad day at work, you lose everything that you've set out to do. You've skipped all the meals in the day and you're binging at night. Yeah. Right? But I'd say those are the 3. They're not all separate misconceptions, but I think the main misconception is it's just changing a couple of things and then you're done and dusted, wipe your hands of it, off you go. Because actually it does take work and it does take time, especially if you've been dieting for 10, 20, up to 50 years. Some of my clients have been dieting for 50 years. So it's like, of course, it's got to take time and conscious effort to change.
Yeah, I think everything that you've said is like really, really amazing. There are certain things that when you've been on that journey of like becoming an intuitive eater again, because like when we're born, we just eat how we want to, right? And that's the way that it's meant to be. But like when you're taking yourself through that recovery journey, like you don't necessarily, unless you do it in a structured way with somebody helping you, you don't necessarily see all of the steps that you're taking to like getting yourself to being fully intuitive eating, right? So it does need to be broken down into smaller steps. And I think that another thing that you said, which I think is so important, is about emotional self-regulation. And I think that that's really important just because many people, I feel in the encounters that I have had with women, actually don't even realize that they have emotional eating going on. And that can be such a big hindrance. And another thing that also occurred to me is that you can take intuitive eating instead of like another diet, right? It's just a set of rules to follow, but it's actually not that. Like you were saying, there's a whole lot of deeper inner work, and that's just guidelines, right? But it's guidelines to help you get to that deeper inner work that is ultimately going to set you free. So as we wrap up this conversation, how would you say that food obsession and, body dissatisfaction, exercise obsession, all those things held you back in your life? And since being on your healing and recovery journey, how would you say that your life has improved?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, firstly, I would say it held me back in the fact that I felt almost like it was a weight on my shoulders, a metaphorical weight on my shoulders that I was constantly having to put so much effort into being quote unquote healthy, and just being, there was so much effort and it was taking up so much energy and time in my mind to focus on it. And it was like that I was saying earlier in the conversation, like waking up in the morning after a fun night with my friends and feeling like I had to go to the gym, when actually I could be lying there chatting with them, ordering a nice breakfast in, like, quality time with people that I love, but also being present with them. And I think all of those things that have changed since then are like the reverse of that, that I've had so much more freedom with my time. Now I don't feel such a inclination to have to go to the gym. Then I can choose, like, okay, well, I'll just do a short like dance at home. Maybe I'll just rest instead. And actually, I've found the joy in myself to rest just so amazing. And like my sleep's improved and my relationships have improved. And like I was saying in the last question, that when intuitive eating is about connecting to yourself on a deeper level. So when you understand yourself and your body on a deeper level, your life is more peaceful. Your life is more tranquil because you just understand why you're having certain thoughts. You don't get carried away with thoughts. You don't get into anxious mindsets and everything, because you can then see what's going on, right? You can see what's going on in your mind and in your body. So I would say that's the main thing, which is a huge thing, really.
It is a huge thing. And that's why I wanted to ask that question, just to put into perspective for people how much there's a woman, what's her name? Well, anyway, she's the host of Christine Harrison, that's her name, the host of the Food Psych podcast. And she calls diet culture the life thief. And I feel like that's what you're saying right now, right? That being stuck in that kind of like diet mindset that many people are without even realizing, it steals from your life. And when you free yourself from it, your life becomes so much richer. So that is really the purpose of me asking you that question, because I know that you have gone through that transformation and you can share it with other people who are listening, just how important it is to do this work, because it may not seem like an important thing, but it actually really is something that can improve the quality of your life. So thank you so much, Cleo, for all of your presence and just your thoughtful responses. And I know that this is going to be really valuable to every person who watches.
Yeah, thank you so much as well. It's been such a nice conversation and always nice to talk to you.
Yeah, I loved it. Thanks, girl.
Thank you.